Some of yous may remember that last year I made a video about Disco Elysium's spiritual successors. There was one game that spurred me on to make that video, Rue Valley. It was the game that I had the highest praise for of all the games within that video. And without even realising it, the release of the game snuck up on me. I only realised because I was graciously gifted a full copy of the game by Owlcat Games weeks before its release. See that, bitches? I'm in the big leagues. It's time to switch up on my day ones.
Hey, what's going on? Hey.
Oh my god, it's Sam! Yay!
Get on, friend.
Hi, Sam!
Kill yourself! Now, with that being said, this isn't a sponsored video. I'm not being paid, and the opinions presented are purely my own. And also, this video will not go into any spoilers. I am here by my own volition to convince you to play the game because I genuinely enjoyed it that much. The plot of the game hasn't changed since the last video I made on it. You play as a man named Eugene Harrow. You've been sent to mandatory therapy after some undisclosed incident. This therapy takes place in Rue Valley, or basically bumfuck nowhere. One of the places where everybody knows everybody. Throughout your first day, there are several moments that stand out to you. First, a really weird phone call from some legal agency trying to get you to let you know that, you have rights. Then, a massive lightning strike that knocks out all the power for a few seconds. And just as you start to fall asleep, the sky basically explodes. Before you know what's happening, it's 8 PM. Right back to when you ended your first session of therapy. Now, most media involving time loops generally takes place over 24 hours, which gives the characters a lot of freedom to do whatever they please. But what's interesting about Rue Valley is that the entire time loop takes place within 47 minutes. This basically means that the main mechanic of the game is keeping track of every minute and keeping a mental note of what tasks you can do in a single loop. You can't travel the breadth of the map in the span of one loop. Traveling between areas takes set amounts of minutes. Talking to people and investigating takes up time. Certain people will only arrive at locations at certain times. So, massive part of the game is time management. Time is literally money. You've only got so much to get what you need done, so you have to make it count. Each loop is a balancing act of figuring out how you can squeeze as much information you can out of a single loop. It might sound difficult or tedious, but it's actually super enjoyable, and you end up keeping a mental note of how much time each task takes without even realizing or intending to. And those events I mentioned earlier are basically like timers reminding you of how much time you have, whilst also having impacts on the story. Like, when the lightning strikes, you know that there's only 10 minutes left in the loop and you gotta wrap up whatever you wanted to do. It's really clever. Obviously, one of the biggest themes to this game is mental health. Before I hear anybody say, another game about depression, shut the fuck up! Oh, sorry mate, we won't ever make a game about interpersonal themes ever again. The Rue Valley sequel is all gonna be about football and guns and you can pack Pele in it. Jokes aside, I think Nitro Rad said it best when he said, if you can make 100 games about people shooting guns and it still be entertaining, you can make 100 games about what goes on in somebody's head. I'm paraphrasing, but you get the gist. Even though the game has a major focus on mental health, it does it in a really cool and unique way that no other game has really done before. Firstly, in basically every RPG, you pick your stats to help you out in your playthrough. Strength, intelligence, stuff like that. And you'll know, these are kind of all positives. But Rue Valley does the complete opposite. At the start of the game, you basically have to pick... I don't want to say mental illnesses, but I guess mental weaknesses is the best way to describe it. Whether you're incredibly shy or you're way too quick to share, whether you're incredibly calculated to a fault or you don't think about things before they come out of your mouth, you think these things would just be straight up hindrances to your gameplay. But no, the game makes sure you know these things are neither good or bad. They're just a part of what makes you, you. Yes, sometimes being super paranoid gets you thinking that everything is a Truman Show-esque setup, but sometimes it helps you find out things that players who weren't paranoid would have missed. You might have been super calculated to the point you can solve tough problems very easily, but also be so calculated that you overthink the simplest solutions to the point that it overcomplicates everything. Again, these aren't good or bad things, they're just things. It's very in line with the game's themes of mental health and personal relationships. Your character was sent to therapy to deal with their own issues, and they do so throughout the game. But you don't spend your time sitting in the therapist's office. You spend each loop talking to anybody you can, seeing what problems they have, how they deal with them for better or for worse, and then you relate those problems to your own character's experience. It's not just a regurgitation of Eugene's inner monologue. He progresses by empathizing with other characters, which is something a lot of those RPGs about depression don't really do. And it's not just about depression, it touches on a lot of things that you don't really see often in games. Dementia and how it affects people around them. How people can end up utterly hating people in relationships and yet still feel a strong dependency on them after being together so long. It's really deep. I should also mention that the game is partnered with Movember, which, if you don't know, is a charity centered around men's mental health. So, all the discussion in the game isn't just for nothing. Buying the game goes towards a good cause. And to anybody who came here from Disco Elysium looking for a bit of social commentary, the game has that too. I don't want to go too in depth because, spoilers, but there's a couple of companies in the story that play a major part, from how they affect the town around them and how people feel about said companies. So there's still something for you lot. And the art style for this game is absolutely beautiful. Obviously, one glance at it and you should be able to tell that it takes very large inspiration from graphic novels and comics. As I said in the previous video, quite a Spider-Verse art style, especially in the animations. They've got that kind of animated on twos look that really sells it. A lot of the landscapes are just desolate mesas, so you'd think the backgrounds would be pretty half-assed, but no, they still look really aesthetically pleasing. And whenever you're not in the fucking desert, that's when the backgrounds and surroundings really get to pop. The Kuiper Belt especially, that's one of my favourites. A lot of movies are adopting the graphic novel art style, but Rue Valley is one of the few games I can think of that's tried it, and probably the only one that's pulled it off successfully, or at least to the extent that it has. The only thing I'd say is that I wish there were a few more character portraits, because some of them don't really give a good look at the characters. A lot of yous know I'm a gimp for music. If you have a look at my channel, you would know that, and this game's music is bliss. That being said though, there isn't a lot of it, but when they do play music, it perfectly fits the mood. One of my favourite tracks is the driving music. Extremely minor spoiler, but after you figure out you're in a time loop, one of the things you can do is try to outrun the explosion in the sky. This is where you get to hear the full track, and it's brilliant. It perfectly encapsulates the urgency of the situation. The song itself kind of reminds me of Whiplash, though that's probably just because there's such an emphasis on the drums in the track. And I guess while I'm on the topic of audio, the voice acting is spot on for this game. Every single person was perfectly cast, and delivery for the lines were perfect. Especially in the impactful moments, they really knew what they were doing. Actually, you probably will get a better look at the voices than I did, because in the version I got, there was a lot of lines that were not implemented yet, which means I had to read it. Don't worry though, the developers have confirmed that all NPC dialogue will be fully implemented at release. So don't you worry, you're little heads, you don't have to strain your brain like I did. Now, I want to bring up what I said in the last video that I made about Rue Valley, where I said Rue Valley feels like a spiritual successor to Disco Elysium. I don't agree with that now that I've played the game. Yes, they're both isometric RPGs, but that's just a genre. That's like saying, dude, this game is such a Mario-like. And I hate to break it to you, but RPGs have existed well before Disco Elysium. I do agree that people who enjoyed Disco Elysium will probably enjoy this game, but I don't want it stuck in the shadow of Disco Elysium. It's really its own thing, with its own message and story to tell. So, I'm stuck in a middle ground between wanting to share this game to as many people as possible, and the most effective way to do that is to give people something to compare it to, while also not downplaying the individuality of the game and just saying, dude, it's like Disco Elysium, but it's not. Because it deserves to be its own thing, and I think it works incredibly hard to do so. Now, with all that being said, there were 1 or 2 issues I had, albeit very minor ones. And the thing is, most of these will probably be fixed before the game actually released, because I'm technically not even playing the quote-unquote final version. One of my main gripes is that during a certain intention nearing the end game, you need to visit an area that takes nearly the whole 47 minutes to get to. And once you get there, you need to navigate through dialogue options very carefully, or else you will fail your intention. However, this interaction is so trial and error that I think I spent about 45 real-life minutes getting through one conversation. Now, to be fair to the game, in all other instances where the game knows that, you're going to be traveling back and forth and you're going to need more than one loop to do whatever you need to do, it kind of trims the fat of traveling back to the area, and it just does a splash screen indicating that a loop has passed, or it plays a montage. But for whatever reason, the devs just refuse to implement this for this interaction, one of the longest ones in the game. Which, yes, I get that it's supposed to be tedious, like the character you are talking to is very hard to deal with, let's say, but I feel like after 2, 3 failed attempts, could you not have cut us a break? On the other end of the spectrum, there were times that the game skipped some loops to make it easier, when I actually wouldn't have minded playing out the loops in full. But that's just me though, and maybe if they were actually played out in full, I would be saying differently. At one point, I ended up jacking a car, and I have no idea how, but I ended up in the fucking back rooms. During a pivotal story montage, the game kept freezing and whiting out like it was about to crash, though thankfully after waiting a few seconds it composed itself, but still, it was quite stressful. And lastly, they have Mike fucking Pillock in this game. Ew. And that is basically all I have to say without getting into spoilers. I've, without a doubt, have to say that this is contender for Game of the Year for me. I know some people won't really take that to heart. I do give a lot of games very high praises, but most of the time it's kind of hyperbolic. Not this time though. I believe that the game has taken the concept of the time loop and pushed it further than anything else has gone. It hits that sweet spot of how much control the player has over the loop. If you love Disco Elysium, you'll love this game. Even if you don't like Disco Elysium because you get called a fascist, haha, you might still like this game. It's a lot easier to digest and it doesn't require as much brain power to take in the themes and writing. The game takes roughly 15 hours to beat according to the devs, but I did it in 11, so it's very possible there's other avenues to the game that I may have just completely missed out on that you could see in your playthrough. So please, go show your support to Emotion Spark Studio and play it. The link is in the description.
No, not really. Not at all. There's no alternative to space exploration and colonization. It's just a matter of time.
The voices!